So we'll pull the mask off. All right. So I'm excited to be here, Kevin. I know we met through John Maida. So we're doing something called Rebrand Black, and it's really about a series of conversations around Black excellence, around Black innovation, and Black culture. And so we're talking to a series of thought leaders, and so I know that there's a community of people that know and love the work that you do. I know there's a common thread in terms of you being from Michigan, but why don't we just start with, so if people have never met you before, I know you're the founder of Dreams, Design, and Life.
You got it.
Right? But give us some context in terms of just kind of who you are, just so that people can just get connected to you.
No, I appreciate it. And first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege. So when I started out, I have to go back to the youth in that I didn't necessarily come from design initially, but based on the way the world is moving and shifting, I'm very thankful for the timing of when I found it. I started, most of my youth was in the Detroit metro area. I grew up around business people and engineers that worked primarily for Big Auto. And when it came time to just thinking about career choices and where to go to college and what to major in, notions of design were sort of in the far distance. It was under the guise of art. At least that's where what my mindset was in terms of what was celebrated around me. With middle class upbringing, as much as my family was sacrificing to send their kids to, maybe even remotely get a chance to go to college, there had better been a job on the other side of it. That was sort of the thinking. And so with my interest in drawing and the intersections with math and science, engineering made more pragmatic sense. So I decided to study mechanical engineering, went to the University of Notre Dame, and at the time they were very much interested in diversifying their student population. So it was one of those free visit weekends to come to campus, paid by Notre Dame, to check out the campus, live with students, and see how the culture sort of manifested. And it was a wrap. It was an easy decision to join that fold. And as I navigated the mechanical engineering curriculum, it was a very difficult challenge. Honestly, it was another level from the public education that I was sort of embarking on. So, but I remember that first advisor, that freshman year advisor, saw the initial difficulty I had adjusting to the rigor of Notre Dame, and encouraged me to actually try different majors. Like you should just go, join business or liberal arts. And I was actually offended by that initial assertion. Like at the first sign of difficulty, I got to opt out. That path isn't for me. And I think at that moment, I was determined to figure it out. Like I'm gonna stay in STEM. I'm gonna figure this engineering path out. And sure enough, I did. I think that built some initial resilience. When it came time to choose the first job, starting my career, most of the industries that came to campus had a pitch around, we see you coming into our fold, learning the business, and we're going to stick you on a factory floor. And maybe after 10 years, we'll let you do some of the hardcore engineering work. And just the thought of having so much of a distance between the cool stuff I was learning in the classroom and not being able to apply it, that was a little bit of a daunting sort of thing. But one industry had a different pitch. It was the nuclear industry. They were facing what I would call a knowledge crisis. They hadn't hired young folks for the 10 to 15 years prior to me coming out of school. So when I graduated, it was a wide open door to enter that industry and get some really tangible projects right out the gate. So yeah, engineering, nuclear power, next 5 years, incredible projects that took me all around the world, working with high performing teams to upgrade reactors, to extend the life of these nuclear operating plants. And we worked under mission critical circumstances. So, for every day that a plant isn't at power, the work that we were doing could affect an opportunity cost on the order of $1 million a day. So if you were done late, you were in trouble. If you were done early, you were potentially in trouble.
So timing was critically important. So I wanted to go for mechanical engineering as well, and so did my wife. And so my path was, I was determined that I was going to graduate. I was like, I'm going to graduate. I didn't graduate at the top of my class, but I was like, I'm going to walk, I'm gonna graduate. And so the interesting part about engineering to me is that it prepares you for everything, because it's all about solving problems. And life is nothing but a series of problems. So what I want to get into though is this whole concept about Black innovation. So in our concept and this whole thought about conversations around Rebrand Black, I'm interested, so someone like you who has kind of navigated the design space, you had a chance to work for a company I dreamed of working for, Nike. How did you get access and even get into that space? I don't know if back then if they had all these job boards with internship programs at a Nike or things like that. So how did you navigate like through that?
No. I guess harkening back through the engineering experience, that business curiosity actually led me to business school. And in the business school environment, it gave me a chance to sort of reset and look at my career with sort of fresh eyes. And I would attend those massive MBA career fairs, just like most MBA students. And the National Black MBA Conference, Nike had an obscure booth. Like the swoosh wasn't even that big. It was a tiny little swoosh. And you had to like scan to know that Nike was there. And when I walked up to the gentleman that was manning the booth, he was basically like, why Nike? He wasn't trying to hear all the subtleties, and I could tell he was tired of hearing the message of, oh, Nike's the dream company, I love your athletes, I love the products. He wanted to know like where I was coming from, like why did I see myself potentially in the Nike environment? And I just told him, hey, you know, here I'm coming from an engineering background, I'm adding the business layer, and Nike is this interesting environment that has all these elements. And you also have these creative elements, you know, and loving to draw for hobby. I wanted to just learn in that sort of cohesive environment. And thankfully, he gave me his business card. I guess he liked the answer and allowed me to keep in touch with him. So by the time I graduated, he afforded me a role in his business planning organization. So I started as a business planner of all things, but the product guy within me was itching to meet product folks. And sure enough, coffee chats led to meeting more people. And then I actually found opportunities to stretch myself for free for some of those product teams to show them that I was really passionate about what they did, that I could potentially contribute. And so working a second side hustle to show them I was really about what they were doing. And that led to an invitation to join Global Footwear Product Engine. So now I'm seeing real life professional designers for the first time in my career, and I couldn't get enough. I was so curious. And my job was very much operational in nature, but I just kept asking my newfound design friends, like, what are you doing? What tools are you using? How can I maybe try some of those things? And then we have a mutual friend in Dwayne Edwards, who at the time was the footwear design director of the Jordan brand. He had too many briefs, not enough designers to work against them. So he's like, hey, I'll give you a shot if you're willing to learn. So for the next year, I would meet him in the mornings at like 6 a.m. He was like one of the hardest working people I remember in the Nike environment. We would meet in the early morning, we would commiserate on the brief, and then we would go do our day jobs, and then I would work on his stuff to the wee hours at night, and show up the next morning, rinse and repeat.
Wow.
And so we launched 2 shoes together, me doing the design heavy lifting under his mentorship and advice and counsel. He invited me to join the Jordan folks for product reviews, and nervously I would put my sketches on the table and get feedback. You know, so he allowed me to go through the entire process, and sure enough, they launched 2 models of shoe around this particular story, and then that door led to other open doors. So that was the first runway for design for me.
That's so interesting. So I worked for a small Black-owned footwear company called Mavate Footwear as a sophomore in college, and the lead designer was Dwayne Edwards. Awesome. He had left LA Gear, and so he was over footwear design for us. And so it was amazing having the chance to be able to work with somebody who had worked at Reebok and who had did other stuff, and to have that kind of expertise. So it's amazing. So I think it's interesting. So can you speak to the importance of Black representation and relationships as you start to navigate in the design space or in your career space? Because I think like sponsors are so important. Like John Maeda has been a sponsor for me inside of rooms that I've never gotten into, and he's represented me like I was like family to him. And so so can you speak to that?
No, I mean, folks like John again, we share a lot of mutual mentors. It sounds like they are life-changing catalysts for us. They're encouragers, they're motivators. They speak for us when perhaps others don't think to even think about us being in the room with them. When I navigate design and innovation circles, one of the frustrations is I don't see enough of me. I don't see that representation. And I have to lean on my mentors outside of my immediate spaces a lot because I don't find more of myself in those lanes as often. So with that said, though, there's sort of a cognitive dissonance when I think about like the insights that we need to find in the marketplace, the unmet needs, the latent behaviors, attitudes, motivations, aspirations that we need to like design for. If a design studio is aiming to solve for that need, do they even understand the need in the first place? And I think that clarity is only achieved when you have some of that audience in yourself. So it just frustrates me that I don't see more of me, more of people of color in design and innovation, but it basically boils down to it's now a business imperative the way the world is moving to have that representation. So there's a lot of catching up that we need to do within the ranks of design and innovation.
So yes, that brings me to a point. I think we were kind of having like this conversation earlier. So so when I look at our community, like the Black community, I don't see any lack of creativity. Like, I mean, some things we create out of necessity, we reverse engineer stuff, we come up with incredible ideas. The marketplace is designing stuff for people that look like us, but we're not in the equation of being able to design like everyday products, interesting things. What can we do to address this? Because they'll always say that there's a pipeline issue. Like that's always one of the excuses. Like it's a pipeline. We recognize that there's that excuse, but you know what I'm saying? So how do we get past this like pipeline issue excuse and get more access?
No, I think the first thing is that we are out there. There are, I go to conferences all the time. I participate in design community where I'm really trying to just find like for like me's that are out there because I want to connect, I want to learn, I want to network and be a source of help for them as well as receive help. So connecting together is one thing, and there's initiatives that are happening, like Where Are the Black Designers is one example where for the first time ever a few months ago 10,000 people got on social media and saw each other for the first time.
Okay.
The second thing is, as you said, a lot of brands tend to extract culture and translate that into products and business opportunities, but we don't get to necessarily participate in those mechanisms, in those engines. So we need to, hit our community when they're young and show them that it's just as viable. You can have just as viable career path as much as you might dream of being a doctor or a lawyer. Being a designer is, it can be just as lucrative a career path, and don't just couch it into some, abstraction like art or something that you don't feel is going to, allow you to make a livelihood. Designers are problem solvers too, just as much as we come from that world, from engineering, and the more the world turns, I think the more we're going to find ourselves in multidisciplinary spaces where teams are going to be forced to deal with different disciplinary contributions to impact change, to influence, where the world needs to go.
And you hit on something. So I think a lot of brands extract a lot of stuff from Black culture, like an extreme amount. Sometimes I question the give back. And when I say the give back, I'm not saying like, let's go throw some crumbs and something that doesn't really matter, but like if pop culture is driven by Black influence and is driven by, so we're the tastemakers. So I talked to James Andrews earlier, and so he had this quote from a friend of his where he said, in many cases, we are the oil, but we're not the machine. So we're the athlete, the entertainer, the talent, the hip hop artist that wears the stuff that doesn't get paid, but we're not the machine. We don't We don't own platforms. And so I know you've started your own company. And so I think it's amazing to have an interdisciplinary design space that like had a Black founder. What are some of the challenges or obstacles that you've had to overcome to be able to get the respect that your counterparts are, that you frankly are doing better work than they're doing, but because they know this other company, or we tend to work with people who are like us, or look like us, or that we can relate to. How have you had to overcome those kind of challenges?
That's a good question. I think maybe from the different chapters of career that I've had, and I've worked primarily, before starting Design in Life, I've worked primarily in large organizations. I was unfortunately used to being the only Black engineer, perhaps in a certain lane, whether it be in college or in the nuclear environment. Then business school comes along, and one of few, and then Nike being one of very few Black people in the Nike organization, and just understanding what that takes. The level of mental gymnastics to make everyone sort of comfortable with me because I was different. I didn't come from perhaps the lanes of privilege that some folks may have come from, who were leading large parts of the business, and having that privilege, that power, to enact and drive a company like that. So I think it was the next chapter of career was getting into innovation work after my design education, where I got a taste of the multidisciplinary run, like what it can mean, because that in and of itself is very rare in most large organizations. To bring design, tech, and business together, that's usually the exception, not the rule in most organizations. So I got to live that runway, thanks in part to supporting organizations like the Boston Consulting Group that allowed us to build a muscle called digital ventures inside of BCG. So we were cultivating startups, and I was one of very few people of color that was serving that organization as we were growing it. And all of a sudden I'm finding myself in leadership roles and responsibilities that I never would have dreamed of 5, 10, 15 years ago. And it was just based on the evidence that we were showing of what was possible. And we were challenging paradigms that actually sort of cut at the heart of that existing machine that had been based on so much like sort of pre-existing power and privilege that wasn't afforded to Black people. And knowing like how I could create value, or my teams could create value for a client in the likes of the BCG environment and all that gravity of relationship, it gave me courage to say, you know what, I can deliver this value too, but basically stand on my own 2 feet and do it, and stand for my own values, and encourage other organizations that I work with to think about things with a wider aperture. Wider aperture in terms of how we do things from a methodology perspective, a wider aperture in terms of not doing things the same old way that have been sort of pre-established by existing avenues of power and privilege, being a lot more inclusive. Like again, we're trying to solve those converging needs that are happening in the world. We need diverse teams to be able to like empathize correctly to do that. So that's what's guided me.
So now, are there some Black designers that you could that you've ran into, you've had a chance to interact with, that maybe were inspirations to you that maybe other people don't know, or just designers of color? Lots of times, I don't think we give people their flowers while they're living. And so then we wait till people are gone, and then we say, oh, they were great this, or they did that. Right. But I'm always interested to find out names of people who inspired you, or who are doing great stuff that, that we can read up on.
So one example, no longer living, unfortunately, Charles Harrison was a prolific Black industrial designer, responsible for many of the household items we take for granted today. Worked a long time for Sears Roebuck, so his story is incredible in terms of just the lineage of industrial design heritage and influence he's had on American sort of modern culture. Again, doesn't get enough flowers for those contributions. Other folks, like we mentioned, Dwayne Edwards, just watching over $1 billion in footwear sales to his design credits. And then
Like, man, I didn't even know that. Like that is incredible.
Yep.
And then walks away from that and goes and does something else. Right?
We had early conversations when he was formulating the vision of what he wanted to do next.
Yeah.
And it was all around the spirit of outreach. Like, how can I help the next generation of designer follow my wake? He's like, I've designed enough. I've created enough business opportunity around my designs. I want to educate the next generation. And he had his interesting path of discovery of trying to understand if you could do that within the Nike environment or if you had to go outside. And ultimately, he made the hard choice to leave an organization that I'm sure he loved and had such incredible experiences dealing with Michael Jordan and the like. But to see what Pencil has become now, it's quite incredible.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That is definitely amazing. What tips would you have for the next generation of Black designers that are trying to navigate, trying to, as Steve Jobs would say, put their dent in the universe? What tips would you have for for the next generation?
I guess it makes me sort of reflect on like what I felt when I was first discovering the field of design, starting at Nike. There's a certain pedagogy, there's a certain like subjective portrayal of what design is, and it usually comes from dominantly a Eurocentric sort of beat, and just at the inertial perception of it alone, like we may just not fit. How we feel either embraced or not, or the subjective criteria of which we're evaluated of whether we can become part of this design community. There's a lot of resistance, subconscious, covert resistance to different people coming into the industry. And I want to see that change. So, and you don't necessarily have to go to this school or work for this design agency or work for this brand to be esteemed a designer. I think what I would encourage the next generation to consider is that your full lived experience, where you come from, how you've navigated life, all of that is relevant and contributes to you being a successful designer. So you got to you got to learn to celebrate yourself. You got to sort of derive self-belonging and feel confident in your own skin about who you are. And of course, reach out to the community. We're out there. Black designers are out there functioning and thriving, and we definitely have an appetite to want to connect and help. So reach out, find those communities where we exist, follow the thought leadership, even contribute thought leadership of your own as the next generation. Like, there's interesting insights that I'm learning from designers that are younger than me. And I view mentorship as a two-way street. So connect to community, share your lived experiences. So participate on social media, make sure you have LinkedIn, make sure you're sort of feeding your perspective, because you're going to inspire someone. If it's just one person that gets inspired by what you're doing as a young Black designer entering the field, you're going to inspire so many others to follow your wake. And again, it can be a lucrative path. So we got to share each other's experiences more and more, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really critical. So as we close, what I'd be interested in are there any projects or any things that you're working on that that the world needs to know about, that we can amplify or that we can talk about and maybe build awareness of? I think in our community we have to do a better job of celebrating each other. I don't look at life as being a pie, and if you get half the pie, there's only half left. I look at life as being an unlimited number of pies, and so we want to tell the story or be able to find out if there are things that you're doing that hopefully we can amplify. So are there any things that you're connected to? Sure.
Just a little context on the business. We deliver a two-sided coin. On one hand, it's strategic design to really help business leaders and companies big and small just look to the future and with a wider aperture to uncover opportunities. And based on those opportunities we uncover, really leveraging a robust industrial design process to make sure the design outcome fits that strategy. So I help large organizations of the likes of Nike and Pepsi. But then what really gets me excited is the startups. So there's one startup I'm working with in Irvine, California in particular, called Envoy. And so it's deriving a wellness weight management solution that's part device, part digital experience, part human coaches. And they basically guide employees of large enterprises to navigate to a higher plane of well-being. So think about all the latent unmet needs when you think about busy professionals trying to get through their day, trying to eat right, trying to exercise or find some sort of outlet to reduce their mental sort of stress and anxiety. We're creating a platform, and we're iterating that platform with so many different affordances, and we're increasing the population of people that we're able to help achieve a higher state of well-being, and that we're changing lives when we do that.
I think that's so important. So last year, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had to get a tumor removed.
I didn't know this. Okay.
And so it changed my whole outlook on life. Part of what happened is that I had to make some hard decisions. So part of the decision was, do I go just the pure traditional medical route, or do I look at a holistic lifestyle? So I went plant-based. I think back then I weighed 250 pounds. I ended up losing close to 50 pounds. I began to sleep more, and because I was team no sleep, and I didn't realize the healing zone and being in bed at a certain time. Even though I was exercising, I didn't realize that you can't work out a bad eating habit. And so all these other things, and I realized that I was able to reverse that cancer by changing and making decisions from a holistic lifestyle standpoint. And what I realized is that you have to be super disciplined. So what you guys are working on, guys and young lady, team is working on, is something that's amazing, because the medical route, everything's time. There's pills, there's certain things that you take, and they have you on, there's all kind of stuff. They have you on a plan, right? When you go the other route, you're in the wild. So even if you go to a holistic doctor, it's still on you to be able to manage that, to time that, to do all the things. And so I think having tools that allow you to figure out, okay, how do I manage my eating? How do I make sure I'm getting enough sleep, enough rest? What are some of the other things I need to do? So having movement. So from that, I got a very desk. So I have a standing desk, so I get up and move around. I have a trampoline that's a Rebrand trampoline, so I start the day off doing that. I pray in the morning. So I'm more mindful. I now actually have a routine versus a default routine. My default routine was, okay, I got to eat something in the morning, so I'm gonna have breakfast. I'm gonna pray because that's just who I am. But now I'm more mindful and thoughtful about that, because I realize that there's a physiological, there is an actual impact to my health based upon those things. And so what it sounds like with the tool you guys are doing, it'll help people down that path when you're literally in the wild and trying to figure out, how do I time this? How do I do all these other things?
Indeed.
So that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, Kevin, I appreciate this time. So if somebody wanted to find you online, how do they find you?
Sure, they can start by going to www.dreamsdesignandlife.com.
Okay.
And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram rather easily at Kevin Bethune.
Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate this time. I want to ask this because I know that we're in the season of a pandemic. How is the family doing? Is everybody good? You guys are?
Yeah, thankfully we're all well. Really grateful for the health and safety. And I ask the same of you.
Yeah.
Everyone's well? Okay.
Everybody is good.
Right.
I didn't sign up to be a stay-at-home teacher or anything like that. Even though my daughter's 10, fifth grade math is really hard, even for engineers. And so the whole virtual route has been interesting. She's adapting to it. She's adjusting to it very well. And I'm grateful that I'm in a position to where I can work from the house. My wife can do the same thing. Our offices are right next to each other.
Oh, nice.
And so she complains that I'm too loud. I'm like, look, I'm over here closing deals. I'm closing like Kobe over here. I gotta do what I gotta do. She's like, and so she got these acoustic panels for her side. She was like, okay, so this is what you do all day. So I'm on the phone. I'm walking around. I'm loud and doing stuff. But I'm grateful. The family is great though. The family's doing good. So
There you go.
So cool. All right, Kevin. I appreciate this time for sure.
Bless you, sir. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.